and welcome back to another very special episode of Is the Bus Still Running? A podcast for the UIS Observer hosted by me, Christian Leon Vallejo. And today we have a very exciting podcast episode as we have our very first faculty slash staff on as a guest today, Dre Duvendak. Welcome, Dre.
Thank you for having me.
Now, did I say your last name correctly?
Yes, Duvendak.
Okay, great.
That was amazing. Most folks do not get it correct.
I've tried practicing before. I was like, Duvendak. Okay, I'm glad I got it right. So welcome, Dre, to the podcast. As I said, you're our very first staff slash faculty. We've had just a bunch of students in. So I'm excited to have you and hear about you.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
So Dre Duvendak, her pronouns are she, her, hers, they, them, theirs. She's a program coordinator for Gender and Sexuality Student Services, a youth group facilitator at the Phoenix Center, adjunct instructor at UIS, president of the PFLAG Springfield chapter, and the social media co-chair for Springfield Pride Fest. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, if you would like to introduce yourself, Dre, and just tell us a bit more about yourself.
Well, like you said, my name is Dre, pronouns she and they. I went to undergrad at UIS, and then I also went to grad school. I knew that UIS was kind of like the place for me. My older sister went here, my mom went here, my dad took some classes here. So when I came here as just kind of like a tag-along during my sister's college visit, she left still undecided, and I was like, I'm going here.
Oh.
And so that was really great. I went to school here, had a really positive experience, and then when I eventually graduated from grad school, I was asked to be an adjunct instructor in the communication department, so I was teaching a little bit on the side while I was working in human resources.
Oh.
And I just missed UIS so much. I technically never really left because I just kind of rolled directly into still being part of UIS, but I missed the atmosphere. I missed the work culture. I just missed a lot of things about UIS, so I came back in February of 2021 in a full-time position as the program coordinator for GSSS, and the rest is history.
Yes. Well, that's very interesting to hear and actually help us a big segue into our first topic, being you at UIS. So you said you did your undergrad and your master's here?
Yes.
What did you like about the programs and stuff here at UIS?
Honestly, I feel like what I enjoyed the most about at least the classes I took. I can't necessarily speak for every, program or things like that, because I was not in a science or anything like that. I started off as business administration.
Yeah.
The first day, it was an 8 a.m. a Monday class, first semester, huge mistake. However, it was actually the best thing I could have done.
Yeah.
Because I sat next to who is now my absolutely amazing best friend, who has been my best friend since then.
Oh.
But we bonded over that. It was an accounting class. It was a choice. And after that first semester, I was like, you know what? Not for me. And so 2 weeks into the second semester, I ended up switching it to communication. I got my degree in interpersonal communication with a minor in management because I still wanted to do the same career kind of thing. I still thought I wanted to go into human resources, which I did. So technically, I fulfilled my dreams. And then for my graduate degree, I did the communication program as well, but it ended up kind of cranking out to be more of a mass communication focus on that. But I think what I really liked within that is that the content was so applicable to so many different parts of my life.
Yeah.
There are some classes that I genuinely believe saved my the dating and relating one. That rescued different relationships that I had been in with friends and family. It helped me communicate more. I thoroughly believe that it was a really positive thing for my relationship with my then partner, who is now my spouse.
Wow.
And so classes like that really struck me personally and helped me develop. But then there were other things like the gender communication course, and some of the other courses that we focused a lot on more about diversity, equity, and inclusion. That was kind of my first introduction to it, rather than you can always say like, oh, you were introduced to it by like just like meeting folks from different backgrounds and cultures, but when it comes to like really understanding my own positionality and like privilege and things like that, that was when I first really started to have some of those conversations. It was in the classroom.
Yeah.
So that was really powerful, I think, in the trajectory of where I went in my life. And so that kind of set me on the path of being really interested in doing more in that direction. And so when I went to grad school, I ended up getting asked to do an interview for the grad assistantship in the Gender and Sexuality Student Services.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, I actually was not out at this time.
Oh, really?
Yes. I had told a couple friends, like 5 friends in 2016. I was like, I think I might be a little queer. I'm not really sure, but I was in my relationship still. I was still trying to navigate that. I love my partner dearly, and I did not want to lose my partner. Not that has happened or anything, but like that was just a fear that I had. I'm from a very small rural area, so I think I had just repressed a lot.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until grad school I went through this interview. I was just trying to get more interview experience. And it was just so powerful, that experience. And when they offered me the position, I was like, yes, like I'll take it. And so for like the first, I would say 2 weeks, the in between of like going through that interview process, like the 2 weeks after that, I was really going through my mind of like, who am I? And like who I, like just like parts of me.
Yeah.
And so even that experience at UIS and like getting the opportunity to interview for that really sparked me to do some internal reflection, and then realize that there are parts of me that I need to be honest with myself about. And then throughout time, it also helped me be more equipped with knowledge and more just terminology that I could then look up stuff on my own to kind of seek out ways to kind of bring that up even in my own life, and to talk with family about it, to talk to my partner about it, to talk to some maybe additional friends and stuff, because it was not necessarily something that I was familiar with folks coming out so late in life.
Yeah.
So I was still very unsure of myself. I had just a lot of questions, and so I really do think that UIS played a major role in not only giving me the opportunity to do that, but to kind of like spark that in the first place. Because I could easily probably be living in the closet if I ended up going to school somewhere else.
Yeah. That's very interesting to hear, and I feel like you and I have very similar experiences in that. I remember when we first talked at the OLAS and GSSS collab earlier this semester, is when I found out that we had like similar beginnings with I was also a business administration, but second semester freshman year was like nope.
Yeah.
Then I switched to communications. I was like, I can't do that math. It's too much.
Yeah.
Too much.
And you know, communication, it's so beautiful that like you can, like I said earlier, you can apply it to so many different parts of your life. But I think it's so useful, and it's so undervalued and underappreciated.
Definitely.
And it is something where I frequently tell folks of like, if you're trying to get just like maybe a minor or something like that, just because you want to take some other classes and stuff, I think communication is a great minor to even have.
Yeah.
Just because I think it can be helpful in the business realm. It can be helpful in the STEM field, because we need to be able to effectively communicate with people to save lives in the medical world.
Yeah.
To make sure that we are communicating when we're in, labs, or when we are, if we want to be a veterinarian, we need to be able to communicate to people about their pets and instructions and things like that. Like, communication literally is so vital in, like, every way. Even if someone's like, well, I plan on being behind a computer the rest of my life kind of thing, well, like, you need to be able to talk to other programmers. You need to be able to do all these other things. My partner is a software developer, software engineer. And I'll tell you what, communication has been really, really crucial in a lot of the different things, especially now that, COVID hit and things like that. Communicating is super important when you're doing stuff virtually.
Yeah.
So communication was amazing. So I'm really glad that it was a positive experience for you too.
Yes, thank you. Also, to reflect on a couple things you said. So, were you very involved into like the GSSS program and the Diversity Center as you were a student here on campus?
Full transparency, no. My best friend that I met, my 8 a.m. Monday class, Dajane, what's up? She actually was in Necessary Steps.
Oh,
And so I went to some events and I did things like that because of her involvement. And I was able to get to know Dr. Ford. I was able to get some introductions to some other folks. I hung out with a bunch of the Necessary Steps folks, but I never necessarily was involved with a lot of the programs as an undergrad. I was primarily actually involved with like the volleyball club.
oh,
So that was kind of was consuming of what I was doing. And I also for a period of time was also a resident assistant.
oh,
So that's what I had been doing, and then I was also fast tracked on my undergrad. I ended up graduating in 3 years, so
oh,
it was. And then I moved off campus, so like there's a whole bunch of factors that went into it. But for my undergrad, I definitely wish I would have done more. However, I went to a lot of events hosted still by like International Student Services, and at the time, they were like located within the same area as the Diversity Center. So I was able to kind of like tangentially still get a lot of exposure and do a lot of like fun events that kind of was that introduction for the Diversity Center without necessarily going to the Diversity Center space as much. When I went to grad school, that very much so changed because I was a graduate assistant in GSSS.
yeah,
And so that is like where, not like I mentioned, like my whole world got flipped upside down in the best kind of way. But that's when I really started to get more involved directly, getting to know folks and kind of learning also a lot of stuff that I unintentionally like was involved in and stuff. Like my first semester I did like coming out on the quad, like the closet door on the quad event. Dajane was standing right next to me because I was terrified about going up, and then I eventually went up there and kind of spoke about at the time being an ally and things like that.
yeah.
And so there are ways that I was involved, but I never necessarily tied them together with the offices themselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you say that the UAS campus and like its environment has changed a lot since you being a student here?
I would say definitely, but also I think that it has shifted because I have also grown and changed, and like the fact that now I'm in a professional setting, I obviously can't get all the information from like a student's perspective, but based on the conversations I do have with students, it does sound like there has been a shift. And I think whether it's a good shift, a bad shift in different areas, I think there is a lot of information that is accessible for the campus now that at least that I'm aware of, that I think with the increase in modernization and technology and stuff, like all these like rotating screens on the campus, like I was here like when US Connection became a thing. And so like we like solely relied on social media, we relied on physical flyers and things like that. That's what we did for advertising and things like that. So I think there's also been a shift of getting knowledge to folks because of more streamlined processes and things. So with that, some folks have become more educated on certain topics, myself included. I think that we have found some more ways to kind of find ways to partner between faculty and staff, between students and finding mentors. There's a lot of really amazing programs that I think that have kind of sprouted over the handful of years that have gone by since I was in school, that I think are really positive, that are contributing to at least getting these conversations started and having this dialogue. So there's like a yes and component to it.
Yeah. Well, that's all very interesting to hear. So I appreciate you for sharing that with us. And I was wishing we could transition a little bit over to your queer identity, if you wouldn't mind sharing with us.
Yeah, so Um, I identify as polysexual and gray asexual, and I know that for a lot of folks, those terms are completely brand new. That is totally okay. I discovered them on the internet, and so that was
Oh,
awesome. But that's why I always tell folks there's a lot of power in Google.
yeah.
And because I was looking for who I was, and for me, labels have helped me find a community, and labels have also helped me feel affirmed in who I am because, again, these are labels that don't necessarily come up in everyday conversations, and the umbrellas that they fall under, I had been, familiar with them somewhat or things like that.
Yeah.
But the way that I had seen or kind of experienced and the way that I've internalized certain labels to mean, it just didn't ring true for me. And so some folks have been like, oh, so you're bisexual. I'm like, I don't identify as bisexual. Polysexual can be kind of like underneath the umbrella that is like bi plus. But, and so like, I technically could be like in air quotes because they can't see me, like categorized as that way. But I personally identify as polysexual, and then gray asexual, which is on the spectrum of asexuality. And because I know that they're terms that sometimes are either not fully known or misunderstood, I get questions about a lot of the assumptions when I say I'm polysexual. Some folks be like, oh, so how does polyamory play out in your marriage and things? I'm like, I did not say polyamory. I said polysexual. They're not the same thing. Which is like, I know that like they have the same first couple letters and stuff, but I a lot of times just say I'm queer because that's also really liberating for me. I know that's also, again, not the language that everyone uses, but for me personally, I do find a lot of power in the word queer, and for me personally, it is affirming because it also allows me the opportunity to choose, depending on what space I'm in, do I want to have to explain this to other people? If I'm in a predominantly queer space, I know that if I, during our conversation say like, oh, I'm polysexual and I'm gray ace, that a lot of folks in the space are going to know about it, and that if they ask me a question or something, it's not going to likely be with bad intentions, or it's going to be like, oh, super dope. Can you explain that a little bit more? That's just a new term I didn't know about, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Versus like, what in tarnation is that kind of thing? So I have to navigate also the environment that I'm in based on what language I choose to use. But that is kind of also what how I identify. So queer as like an overall kind of label. So if I'm, in a space that I'm a little bit less familiar with, but I feel safe in, then maybe I'll just say I'm queer. Now, if I do not feel safe or I do not know the situation, I am going to keep my head down and not even, like, I'm not going to mention it.
Yeah.
But it's kind of hard because I feel like I am like just like a walking embodiment of queerness. Because, green hair, I usually am wearing something super colorful. Not saying that means that you're queer, but it is kind of my way of also expressing some of my queerness.
Yeah.
Because I feel like my creativity and how I express myself on the exterior, for me personally, is also linked to my identity because I am married to a cisgender heterosexual man, and I am perceived as being a woman. I identify as like gender non-conforming, like woman-ish. So like I don't identify as trans, but I also don't necessarily fully identify as cis. I'm kind of just like gender ? But like on the women-ish side, because I was socialized as a girl. I was brought up in a society that treated me as such, and so I have experienced a lot of similar things. So that's why also when it comes to like gender identity, I focus more on my gender expression versus like a specific label, because woman-ish isn't necessarily always a box I can check. So I just kind of go with gender non-conforming in that way. But that's kind of what I mean too about like how I dress and things like that is also really tied into my identity, because I also like to kind of like bend what people think in terms of gender and things like that in my expression.
That's all very cool. I know you mentioned earlier that you didn't come out till like later in life.
Mm-hmm.
How did your like family members or like parents, were they still like super supportive? Did they really not like care that much just since it was later in life, or like how was that situation?
So the tricky part is that I was already in. I had been like a serial monogamous person, and typically had well, not typically. I had always been in serial monogamous relationships
Yeah.
with men, and so I was still my current partner. Also, like I said, identifies as a cisgender heterosexual male,
Yeah.
um, and so we had already spent many years together. We had kind of figured out like, okay, we're each other's person, kind of thing like that.
Yeah.
And so I I don't know if it would have been received the same way if I hadn't been in a committed relationship with a man. With my immediate family, I think that they love me regardless. And it doesn't change the fact that I was uber terrified to like tell them. And my siblings found out and knew before my parents did.
Oh.
Um, Me and my partner actually we had already been living together, things like that, by the time that I told him.
Oh.
And one of my favorite parts, he might not like that I share this, but
Yeah.
I had kind of, you know, said like, hey, I might be a little queer, and I was like bawling my eyes out, and I was like, please don't be mad, I'm sorry. Like, I don't know why, I'm pretty sure I was just like word vomiting at that point.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, do you still like me? And I was like, yes, I love you. And he was like, oh, then it's fine. And I was like, oh, yes, awesome, that's fantastic. And so eventually I had just kind of like been like living my life. I had never like formally come out to certain family members and stuff, and still to some of my other family members. At this point, I feel like they just know. I think when I got my current job, it was kind of like a okay kind of thing. But again, some of them I'm sure are living in a little bit of denial and probably are like, oh, Dre, that ally, because I'm married to a man, and so there's that like erasure there. But I remember really vividly that at a certain point, I have 3 other siblings. They had found out. I think I had told my sister, and then my 2 younger brothers found out somehow. I'm not really sure. But one of my brothers had assumed that my parents also knew.
Oh.
And for Christmas one year, we do the sibling gift exchange kind of thing. He got me a gift that was a T-shirt that, those shirts that have like the NASA symbol on it.
Yeah.
Well, he got me a shirt with that exact design, but instead of NASA, it said gay.
Oh.
And I opened it up in front of my parents, and I got bright red, and I like immediately like shoved it in my lap. And like looked at him with like a death stare, and he was like, you like it? I'm like, and then I like, after they had walked out, everyone was like, what are you doing? And he was like, what? I just saw you like, I was like, I do like it, but I'm not out to them yet. And he was like, oh, well, I just assumed. I mean, it's pretty obvious. I was like, well, okay, now it's gonna be obvious if I wear this shirt. So I don't know, honestly, how much longer after that I ended up doing it, but I ended up just texting my parents.
Really?
I didn't want to have the conversation with them.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was like, they probably make assumptions or assume stuff. So I just put a group chat together, and I didn't, like, text them, hey, I want to tell you this. I decided, let me go ahead and be completely unhinged, and let me just send a meme.
Oh.
And so the meme, do you know that meme where there's that it's like a fish stuffed animal? I think it's like a hand puppet, or I don't really know what it is, that is like grabbing a cat and like pulling it away. It looks like it's like eating the cat, and the cat's like, it's like all scared and stuff. Honestly, it was a really bad meme, but the picture did go viral, so I'm sure that there's at least one person who can understand what I'm talking about. Maybe I can find it and you can put it in the clips.
Yeah.
And he had said something like, me coming out of the closet or something like that, I think. And I just sent that to my parents, no context whatsoever. And then my mom was like, I'm confused. What does this mean? And I was like, in my head, I'm like, this could go one of 2 ways. This could go, I'm still really confused. You're gonna have to lay it out for me. Or it could go with like, oh, you're gonna clarify, and then like we'll have a conversation about it. But I still had no idea how they were gonna respond. In my heart, I was like, of course they're gonna be like loving and supportive and things like that. But I'm like, but that's what we all want to think. And I'm like, I don't know. And to, thankfully, they were chill with it. But I had ended up texting it back and be like, this is what this means.
Yeah.
I, wanted to let y'all know, XYZ kind of thing. And then my mom, so kind, so loving, she goes, okay, thank you for telling us. How do you and my partner's name is David. They're like, how do you and David identify and what pronouns do you use? And I was like, that is so sweet. But I was like, nah, he's like a cishet man. He's still like, it's all good. But like for me personally, this XYZ. And so kind of shared that. So I thought it was really cute that like they didn't invalidate it and they still acknowledged like, okay, this is a legitimate partnership. But also, I think that was part of like they made the assumption of like, well, if I'm a little fruity, he must be too. But that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
But I still thought it was like adorable because it was with good intentions and things like that. And now we have some more open conversations and stuff. And I wear all my gay T-shirts and I do all that stuff. But I also have talked to them about certain terminology and things like that. And it's been, I think, really great with my family, my immediate family, because they'll also sometimes reach out to me and be like, hey, this is a situation I have going on in, like, a workspace or, personally or things like that. Like, how do you suggest I navigate this? Or what, do you have any resources or things like that? And so I really also appreciate that they not only, like, see me as who I am, but they also, like, validate that my firm is, that my job is legitimate.
Yeah.
And that there's so much value in it, and that the work that I do and that I'm able to like pass to others can be super impactful in a really positive way. And so that's really cool, I think, too. My grandma is also surprisingly like super chill.
Oh, really?
At Christmas, so I started going by Dre years before I came out.
Oh.
It just feels like so much more affirming for me.
Yeah.
And I always had people be like, why do you do that? I was like, it's like one friend, my friend Kevin, shout out Kevin, who had called me that my freshman year of college, and then it just stuck. And I was like, this feels so good. This feels so good. And so from then on, like, I just had adjusted all of my information stuff to reflect that name and stuff. And so I always had some family members be like, oh, this is, I was like, you just call me Dre. And they're like, but that's not your name. I was like, well, that's up to interpretation.
Yeah.
But my grandma, I remember, I had never had this conversation with her, but at one of the family Christmases, she had put on my, those little things that say like to and from, she had put to Dre.
Oh.
I literally like ripped it out of the wrapping, and I still have it.
Oh.
I kept it with me because it just meant so much. And like my grandma calls me Dre, and my grandma's quick to correct herself too if she ever slips up and stuff. And like she asks me questions, and like, and my family is like rural. Like my grandma lives on a farm in the middle of nowhere, Missouri.
Really?
And she's like, why can't we just love each other? And I'm like, yeah, Grandma, that's the spirit. But I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like there haven't been some struggles and stuff. Now, I'm really, really thankful to have some other queer family members who I have really strong relationships with. Also some that, I'm not super close with, but like, heck yeah, like, this family's so gay kind of thing. And there have been definitely some difficult times and some hurt and some distancing that I have had to do for my own like mental safety, but also just some boundaries that I think are necessary, because it goes beyond just like who I am and how I identify, but it's like a matter of like respect.
Yeah.
And I think love should be rooted in what we do and how we interact with others. And it was getting to the point where for some folks it seemed more like antagonistic versus like rooted in love, and it made it very clear to me that someone was not willing to have conversations about just like being kind and like maybe they don't know everything or things like that, and just being really firm on some things, because there are some, for example, like with religion. So on in my family, for some parts of my family, religion is super important to their identities, which is totally valid, totally okay. From my personal belief, I do not think that religion and queerness cannot coexist. I think they absolutely can.
Yeah.
I know so many religious queer people. I know so many religious people who are affirming of queer people, and it's this really vicious cycle that is not just like within religious communities, but is also within the queer community. There's a lot of ostracization that happens to queer religious people, as if like you need to choose one or the other kind of thing. And there's so much out there also that is religious text and faith-based text that affirms queerness.
Really?
That it's not focused on. What's highlighted is different interpretations that are more modern than anything. And so I think everyone is absolutely entitled to have a faith that they believe in.
Yeah.
I just, for me, think that for my own sanity and safety, I'm going to take a step back maybe, or like put a boundary between me and someone else if they're going to weaponize a faith I don't think it is necessary. I think if we are leading with love, that weaponizing faith is not part of of love. So there's a lot to unpack there that I won't unpack right now, but so there have been ups and downs, but I would say I have been extremely lucky to have the support of my family, and to also be in a position where even if things did go really badly, I would have been at that point in my life where I had enough safety nets, at least, to kind of hopefully like keep me afloat and things like that.
Definitely. That's really nice to hear that you were able to have that support from your family.
Yeah.
Moving on a little bit, I wanted to know if you could share more about GSSS here on campus, like what it does, what help can people use it as, like, to help themselves out.
Yeah, absolutely. So Gender and Sexuality Student Services is such a mouthful. Like, it is so many syllables that GSSS, honestly, is much easier. So I'm glad that I get this platform to still kind of like talk a little bit about it, because sometimes it's either like, what the heck is this really long department, or like GSSS, what is this? Like it's sometimes hard to kind of tie those together, especially for folks who are even like new to the university and stuff. And so I always like to start out by saying like GSSS is quite literally for everyone. It does not matter if you saw a flyer and you show up to one of our events, if you are interested in a topic, if you're there for extra credit, if you saw that there was free food and you're showing up, if you accidentally wandered in there because you got lost and you're like, I'm actually going to stick around because this is kind of cool. That is totally okay. Whatever brings you there, that's cool.
Yeah.
I think some things that are often associated with our office, which is like accurate, is that we do a lot of emphasis on gender and sexual identities, marginalized gender and sexual identities, and different topics related to those. But we're also big on other aspects as well. So kind of tangentially related to that, we look at some of the struggles that a lot of queer folks experience, whether it's societal barriers or systemic problems. I mean, I know those kind of overlap and stuff, but we look at some of those things, and we also see that there is some overlap with other communities. And so not only do we have like educational opportunities for literally anybody, like Safe Zone and things like that, but we also have a support group, we have a discussion group, we have so we have the support group, discussion group, and our weekly social. All three of those things happen every single week.
Oh.
Then we have reoccurring safe zone trainings that are on different topics,
Yeah.
and those are open to UIS students, faculty, and staff. And then another one of those things that is overlapping that can pertain to everybody, regardless of gender identity, sexual orientation. We have a partnership with the Phoenix Center, and we have one of their certified testing instructors to come in, and they will do confidential, free, rapid HIV testing. It's just like a finger prick. We try to schedule like 2 of those a month. I don't get anybody's name. They come in, they do it, and then they leave, and it's super discreet. We try to make sure that folks know that, we want it to be as safe of a space as possible. It's impossible to guarantee a safe space truly, but we want to make sure that folks know that there's no judgment, there's no assumptions in here. Anyone's welcome. And then another one that is similar to that is our affirmation station. We have bookshelves and things like that all lined down our hallway, and then we have 2 clothing racks also in our lounge for GSSS, and it has clothes, it has accessories, cooking utensils, school supplies, puzzles. We have toiletries, all of the different things. So many things that are either brand new or lightly used that get donated, and they're free to UIS students. They can take whatever they want. If they, recently we've had kind of like an influx of students utilizing it because they're seeking out some winter clothes. So, for example, we know that a large population of our international students are from places that are really, really warm.
Yeah.
And so, they're probably not going to necessarily have a lot of these super, warm clothes and things like that. But in general, buying brand new coats and buying that stuff can be really expensive.
Yes.
And if, as a society, I feel like we're also, at least in the U.S., we're very much about consuming. And so I know myself, I have like 4 different coats. I was like, oh, this one for like if I'm feeling this kind of way, or like this one because it's a little punky. I have some spikes on it, and like this one, it's like my professional one. So, and then I have the one that I wore today that has just a bunch of cats on it. Like I have like a couple different coats and stuff. And so it's important for us to recognize that not only are we like helping with eco-friendliness, less things in the garbage, but also making sure that folks are able to reduce some of those extra costs to still stay in school and to stay warm. So it can even be a safety thing if we look at that, So we have had a lot of students, we reached out to the International Student Services to let them know of like just another friendly reminder. If you have any students who are in need of some winter clothes, feel free to come. Also, not to mention, even if someone is from somewhere that is really cold sometimes, that takes up a lot of room in your suitcase. You can sometimes only bring so much. So if someone wants to come and get a coat or a hoodie or some gloves or a hat, we have that stuff. But same thing when, let's say Ebony Ball rolls around, or the Quince that happens and folks want to dress up and things like that. We got suits. We got really fancy dresses. We have a variety of things. We got heels. We have dress shoes. We have so many different things.
Yeah.
And utilizing the affirmation station has nothing to do with necessarily gender identity or sexual orientation. It started off as a way, because we didn't know how it would be received. So we started off as more of like, hey, this is a way to get some gender affirming clothes and items and things like that. But we saw like this need goes beyond just queer folks.
Yeah.
It also, our bodies change in college. So there's that. And so a lot of students actually have also found like, hey, let me bring a bag of my clothes because I want to take some extra stuff. And so students also feel really good about that as well. And we constantly are putting stuff out. We're putting new stuff in the affirmation station almost every single day.
Really?
I wish I was joking. I'm totally not. Literally almost every single day. We have been rotating a lot of the winter stuff out, and that's been going pretty quick. We just have a ton of stuff in there, and clothes are expensive and things like that, and so we want to make sure that students have that opportunity. One newer kind of thing that we've been doing is we've noticed that sometimes in the donation process, sometimes folks may miss like, oh, this has a tear in here, or this is missing a button, or this has a stain here, things like that. We were noticing that we were kind of accumulating some of those things because like we didn't like immediately throw them away. We're like, I feel like maybe we can like do like a crafting event, or like maybe we can fix this button or something like that. But then we realized that like there's only so much capacity that we have to like doing, you know, crafting events. There's only so many students that like know how to sew and stuff. And so what we ended up doing is reaching out to some folks. I believe the visual and performing arts program over in like the art department and stuff. And we asked them of like, is there any collaboration we can do here? Like, what can we do? Because that is one of the biggest critiques also of like fast fashion is like so much of it ends up in landfills and things like that. And in the office we're also a bunch of like I don't want to say tree huggers, but we're kind of tree huggers. We're like, we want to make sure that we're doing as much as we can to also support the environment. So while we love it when people donate, we also don't want things to end up in landfills. So when we have gotten some things that we've noticed either are slightly damaged or things like that, or maybe it's like a really niche, event that someone attended 12 years ago for a t-shirt, and it's like no one's taking that. Then we have now set up something where folks who are working on like their art projects and things like that have access to this bookshelf of sorts, and we will occasionally go, and when it's empty, we'll put more of the fabric in there and cloth in there, because so much of the art program utilizes different types of materials and fabrics and things like that for their projects. And so we're saving the earth a little bit in that way as well. And then we also have a box called like the last call box, where if there's something that we know has been in there for so many months, we'll put it in there so that maybe it'll give someone like a final push to actually like take that thing, or maybe they've been waiting and stuff like that. If not, if it has fabric and stuff, we'll add that to kind of like what we're doing with that collaboration, or we'll donate it elsewhere if it is still in good condition, or we'll try to figure out how we can repurpose it or things like that. But if it is just, it's not going to work, we have to figure something out. So we do those things, and then we do a lot of collaborations and stuff. One of the big things that we also do is Inquiry, which is our peer educator and scholarship program, where we have a team of 12 students who will receive scholarships each semester that they participate in it, and they come to a retreat that I hope put together. We also have an Inquiry LLE student staff who helps with that program as well. And so we plan like the monthly meetings that we do, we plan the retreat and everything, and the students have to give 3 presentations or like workshops per semester to maintain their scholarship and stuff. It sounds like pretty intense and stuff, but everything that they do, it's always in groups. I'm always present at all of the events that are happening. We do a lot of the scheduling on the back end, and we try to make sure that each student has a different opportunity to get the 3 that they need within their schedule. So it's a great opportunity for students to get involved. No one is required to disclose their identity by any means. You don't have to be queer to be a participant in that. You just have to be willing to educate, be open-minded, and be reliable, and like actually fulfill like some of the requirements and stuff. And I think that we make it pretty fun. And it's a good time, and not to mention a scholarship, and it's great on resumes. So that's some of like the big things that we do, but we do so much, honestly. And like Queertober for LGBT History Month in October is what we have that. We do Trans Visibility Week. We do Day of Silence in collaboration with Take Back the Night stuff. We do so many different things, honestly. It's hard to summarize, but if there's one thing that anyone can take away from this, it's that GSSS is a resource for everybody. Bingo After Dark too is so many folks love Bingo After Dark. That is always like one of our biggest events of the entire semester, and that's about sexual health. We talk about consent, safe dating. We just talk about a lot of the stuff that is considered taboo in society, because that's kind of what we do. We're all about education and empowerment as well. So that's one of those ways that we want to make sure that folks feel empowered to kind of express themselves, and also, engage in safe sex and things like that. It's something that is not necessarily talked about enough, and then by having less information, we see the same patterns keep being perpetuated and stuff. So we want to make sure that folks are staying informed and things like that.
Yes. Well, thank you for expanding on that. I feel like, as you said, a lot of people think it's just for like queerness, but it's open to all. So
Yeah,
I'm glad you were able to tell us and inform more people about that.
And for queer, like the queer community, there are queer people of color, there are queer disabled folks, there are queer undocumented folks, there are um, queer folks who are experiencing homelessness.
Yeah.
There queerness literally is part of every community, and so that is also another thing too. If anyone's like, oh well, I support this community, but I don't support this community. If you don't support necessarily the queer community, you're not necessarily always supporting the full
Other community.
community that they said that they're supporting. So it's like
Yeah.
recognizing the intersectionality also of the queer community, because the queer community is a very large community and it's very vast and it covers a lot of ground.
Yeah. So moving on into a little bit of a different topic. For those of you who don't know, we're podcasting with royalty here today because we have our very first Dancing with the Stars winner.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Are you able to share some of your experiences with that event that was hosted by Baile?
Yes. Okay. So Dancing with the Prairie Stars was awesome. I have my trophy proudly shown. Like as soon as you walk in my office, it's right there on the bookcase, and it was so fun. I think at first, I mean, I know that I come off as like someone who would probably love being in like the limelight and stuff. Like I'm actually like, in my opinion, like I think I'm fairly introverted.
Yeah.
I just know how to like fake it till I make it, or like I'm willing to put myself out there, but then promptly go back into my shell and go home and like do some puzzles and like curl up in a blanket or something. And doing that was, I think, super fun because it allowed me to not only, I feel like, get more connected with students, but I feel like it kind of introduced me a little bit more into music and like the different types of interpretations of it. So when I listen to music and stuff, I listen to it on a very like surface level kind of thing. I know that people are gonna like read me to filth for that, but like I like music, don't get me wrong. But like I listen to it, I'm like, oh, that's a cool beat, or like, oh, that makes cool noises in my ears, like stuff like that. Versus like during the experience, my partner Nancy, woo, fellow winner,
Yeah.
like she kind of explained a little bit more about, the choreography is really related to a lot of the words and the messages within the song, and we choreographed it, like, well, she did like the primary choreographing and things like that, but she kind of like just explained the reasoning behind it, and I think it not only like made it easier to understand the choreography, but I feel like I like got into it, like it was like a performance, like it was like, this is the song and
Like
I'm gonna demonstrate. Yeah, it was a story we were telling, and my partner was in the audience and stuff, and we had watched the recording back. I'm like, you see this part? It's because the words of the song are saying this.
Yeah.
And it's like, I see that. I'm like, I know you do, because it was very intentional.
Yeah.
And it was really wonderful, and I feel like it helped me just kind of like loosen up. Like I feel like I'm actually kind of an uptight person, even though I seem kind of like loosey goose, silly goose kind of thing. I feel like it helped me just kind of like chill. Like life's not that serious. Dance, And so that was really wonderful, and it was, I think, really cool to be invited to participate in it as well, especially as a white person who's not part of the culture. I think it gave me an additional like layer of like another form of like being respectful and like kind of seeing the seeing the significance of different types of music.
Yeah.
With the culture, with the HL culture. And so I thought that was really cool and just informative and educational, and it was really fun. So I was so thankful to be able to be part of that, and I can't wait to see it hosted again and to see what other folks put together.
Yes, I know that because we hosted that event when I was president of Baile. I know I really like the idea of Dancing with the Stars after seeing Shangela compete in Dancing with the Stars that
Yes.
season. And yes, that's how it came to fruition of how hosting that event. So I hope we're able to host it some more times
Yeah.
because I feel like it was a very fun event.
Mm-hmm. And people were talking about it for a while because they saw the recordings of it too, and they're like, "Dang it!" Because I know I don't know if there was like a conflicting event or something like that. A handful of folks wanted to be there, but there was something happening. And I'll tell you what, they saw the tapes and they regretted not being there. And
Yeah.
they will be there when y'all rehost it. So I think even people who saw it virtually after the fact realized that they made a mistake, that
Yeah.
they should have been there.
Yes, definitely. So now moving on to like our final thoughts. Are there anything else you would like to share on the podcast?
Just gonna put it out there. Anyone who's listening, I love you. You are loved. You are worthy. You are awesome. You are valid and affirmed. And feel free to come hang out with us in GSSS anytime. Even if you don't have like a personal crisis or you're going through, you can literally just come and hang out. We want GSSS and the Diversity Center as a whole to be a space where students can just exist and to just be and to not worry about all of this outside noise, honestly.
Yeah.
Because all of the hate and stuff, that's what it is. It's just noise. It's noise intended to distract, to put people down, to make people feel less than. And so our hope is to make sure that our space feels like almost like a home away from home for a lot of students. And so I realized I never actually explained that the Diversity Center is like the umbrella, including the Diversity Center, Women's Center, and GSSS. But we're all one giant Diversity Center team, and it's also okay if you don't identify with having a marginalized identity. You're still welcome in the space. If you have an open mind, you're willing to, again, just lead with love, learn with love, and to just participate, engage, you are so absolutely welcome in the space. And just come hang out, be in community with other folks. We got a coffee maker, if that helps get anyone to come over. We got some TVs, we got computers that folks can, do schoolwork on. They can print stuff. Like, just know that if you come into our space, you're going to be fully embraced and fully loved, and we want to see you there. Even if it's, once. Just making that connection is super important to us, and we want to make sure that you know that we're a resource.
Yes, thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
So as we move on to our last section, that's a madlib. So let's fill that out real quick, and we'll be right back. So we're back, and Dre has chosen the judge's decision. So let's get into this.
Yeah, it felt like it was the most similar to RuPaul's Drag Race.
Okay, so let's start. When it was my turn to audition for RuPaul's Blonde Wig Collection Idol, the reality show where people compete to be the best solo tic-tac, I sang from the depths of my very rump. When my song ended, I could hardly catch my pride flag as I quietly awaited the judge's response. First, Michelle Visage was very kind. She said, "Well, the good news is that you look unhinged."
That sounds like something she would say.
"And you really connected with the Rue girls in that song." Then Christian said, "You know, Turtle, I dug your RuPaul songs, and I thought I really had a chance to make it to the New York City." But then mean old Dre said, "Horrid, terrible, green. You sounded like an animal trapped inside a glove with nails." I gasped and shouted, "Well, you just don't know anything about Drag Race." I stormed out of the Work the World. I was going to make it as a fruity singer, whether the judges from Crown Idol looked at me or not.
That sounded wildly realistic.
It did. I was shocked when it said Michelle Visage was nice.
I know. I was like, out of character. Just had a change of heart.
That was one of the best ones I've heard so far, I think.
Oh,
So
yay.
congratulations.
Thank you.
And I just want to say thank you so much for coming on today's episode, Joy. It was an honor and a privilege hearing like your stories and like how GSSS works and also your experiences here on campus. I really like being able to hear other people's perspectives. So I appreciate you coming on and talking with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for letting me speak and go on my random tangents. I appreciate it.
Yes, well, thank you all for listening. Stay warm out there. It is getting chilly. And see you back on another episode of Is the Bus Still Running? Bye bye.